It's time for the Douglas Coleman Show. Mr. Smooth and Savvy is joined by guests from all walks of life, from the entertainment industry to authors to political and social commentators, the famous and not so famous, the controversial and the light and fluffy. We have it all. Now, here's Douglas Coleman.
Okay, please welcome to the Douglas Coleman Show, Amy Chan. Hi, Amy. How are you?
Hi. Thanks for having me.
Oh, thank you for coming on the show. I always like talking about breakups. I don't know why. Just because it's something that I think everybody's been through, or most people have been through. And it's something that I think a lot of us can relate to. So I'm happy to have you on the show. Your book is called Breakup Boot Camp, is that correct?
Yeah, Breakup Boot Camp, The Science of Rewiring Your Heart.
Now, I read through your bio and it said this is a guide for women. Is it only for women or can men use it too?
No, it's definitely for men or women. I've written it towards, a heteronormative audience just because I'm a woman and I share some of my own personal stories. But really, this is a book about relationship patterns. And so whether you're couple, single, divorce, or dating, this applies to you because it's about the psychology and the science of our beliefs and our patterns that are causing us to create relationship outcomes that we're not happy with.
Okay. Because I know that in our world that equality has been afforded to women greatly over the last 50 years. And we may still have some areas that it isn't quite. But I think overall, women are treated equally in our society in terms of opportunity and jobs and whatever. But is there a difference between how women deal with breakup versus men? I mean, is there still any differences emotionally, or are we both in the same boat?
There is a difference in what I've observed. And so I don't want to make sweeping generalizations, but from what I've seen is men have a tendency after a breakup to move on very quickly, in the sense they might get right back onto a dating app or jump into another relationship. Now, this doesn't mean that they are not experiencing the ups and downs and experiencing the stages of grief that come after a breakup. It's that there is a tendency, more so than women, to distract and avoid the pain. And then eventually they have to deal with it some months afterwards or even years, whether they're in a relationship or they're single. And now what I've seen with women is there's more of an immediate reaction to deal with all of those feelings. And so they have more of a tendency to reach out to, go to a breakup boot camp or see therapy and really get to the bottom of how they're feeling and processing that breakup so that they can go through it and kind of be done with it. And I would say that this is not necessarily because of how men and women are wired, but more so maybe because of how we're socialized, right? There's still this thing called the skinned knee effect, which when a boy falls and scrapes his knee, there has been a tendency in the past to kind of say, be strong, don't cry, and right. Almost like a shunning of feeling the emotions. Whereas when a little girl falls and scrapes her knee, there might be more of a tendency to be like, oh, are you okay? And kind of let her know that it's okay to feel sad or cry and feel what she's feeling. And so this repeated over time can cause, a difference in how people deal with their emotions and the discomfort that comes from something like a breakup.
Well, you're right about that. I mean, that was very traditional about boys are not supposed to cry. They're supposed to be tough, and women were supposed to be soft and emotional and all that. I think some of that has changed, but I think there is a certain leftover element of that in our society. The one thing you did bring up in there that I wanted to circle around back to was dating app. Okay, now I'm looking at your picture. I think I'm considerably older than you, and I remember long before there were dating apps. I've had this discussion with other people that have been on the show. Is this a good thing? Because I'm not convinced that meeting people online for a potential spouse, lover, mate, whatever, I don't know. I tend to like the old-fashioned way of actually meeting people in person. I'm not sure. What's your take on that?
Well, there's pros and cons of both, right? So back before we had an ability to just swipe on someone online, you had to actually, maybe you saw someone at a bar or at a coffee shop, and you had to really summon the courage to go talk to that person and connect. And there's something absolutely beautiful in that, and also an art form. And I would say now that art form and that skill has kind of minimized, because you can go behind a screen and just keep swiping. And instead of sending a heartfelt message, you could just do a heart face emojicon. And so I think some of that courtship has been lost. There's also something when you don't have so many choices, right? I think one of the problems that people are facing now is, if when you're on one dating app, you're usually on a few, and it can almost create this idea that people are indispensable, and you just swipe through them as if you're just, ordering a salad and you're custom picking what you want in it. So it can kind of dehumanize the dating process. But at the same time, it can also enable you to meet someone where before, because of geography, you would have never been able to meet them before. And, I met my partner through a dating app. Someone tried to set us up traditionally a year before we met. And I was like, oh, no, not my type. And then a year later, I swiped with on a dating app, had rapport via messaging, and then, lo and behold, we moved from New York to Vancouver together during the pandemic. So I think there's pros and cons of both ways.
The one problem with the dating app that I could see right off the bat was that people will present themselves inaccurately, and this can be right to the point of catfishing. But there's a point where people put up profiles that just do not match. And then when people meet each other in person, one of the persons is greatly disappointed or even upset that they were somehow scammed into thinking that this person was somebody who they turned out to not be. That's one definite downside. But I think you're right in the positive side, where before, when you had to do it in person, it took a lot more to muster up the courage to do it. Where online, it's kind of easy to sort of, hey, how are you? And start chatting and send pictures and whatever. I don't know. I don't know if the quantity versus quality is a good argument in this case or not. The jury's still out on that one for me. I did want to ask you about your breakup boot camp. Now, this is the title of your book, but is it also a real thing? I mean, is there an actual...
Yeah.
Oh, it is? Okay.
Yeah. So I host retreats, both before the pandemic. They were in person, and we also have virtual ones. But it's a 4-day boot camp. And I bring in 13 different experts, ranging from psychologists to behavioral scientists to breathwork teachers. And we help people after a breakup or divorce. However, we are finding that about 30 to 40% of the people that come aren't actually going through a separation. They are just sick and tired of their patterns in dating, in being single, and they want to get to the bottom of why they keep having the same relationship outcomes. And so a lot of what we focus on at Breakup Bootcamp is not about the ex, because it's never just about the ex. It's recycled pain. There's compound trauma that we bring with us to relationship if we actually don't process the wound and the pain of what had happened. And so we really dive deep into the subconscious beliefs and patterns that are causing the same emotional experience to repeat over and over again, just with different people.
You said it's a retreat, so it's 4 days. Before that, let's talk pre-COVID. So people would go there, they would stay for 4 days. Is this done at a hotel, or where do you do this?
Yeah, so we would hold retreats in private estates in nature, so a 120-acre farm,
Oh,
both
wow.
in California and in upstate New York. It was really important for me when choosing the locations that it was surrounded by nature, and there's, goats and baby horses in the venue, and we have an on-site chef and our team that cooks really nutritious meals, because it's all connected. The heart, mind, body, soul is all connected. You can't just go to talk therapy. You can't just do, breath work and meditation. You can't, heal the heart when you're not eating properly and you're not sleeping. And so we really, really emphasize a holistic approach when it comes to healing the heart.
How long have you been doing this?
I'm going into year 5 now.
Obviously, COVID has changed the personal part. So you have moved this, doing it remotely online?
Yeah, so we do it via Zoom. It's still very intimate. We only have 25 people and many different facilitators. And it's been really incredible to see how impactful it has been, especially for those who weren't able to come to a physical retreat, either due to, cost or travel or even anxiety of being physically, outside of their home with a group of strangers. I've had a lot of people who are more introverted say that the online version is the only way that they would do it. And they've been able to really get a lot of impact and still that sense of community, especially right now when your typical ways of coping and going out and seeing friends is not available due to the pandemic.
I had a guest on a few weeks ago who was challenging the idea of long-term monogamy, saying that the mark of a successful relationship should not necessarily be how long you've stayed together. And it was an interesting conversation. Again, the jury's still out in my head about whether I agreed or disagreed with him. But what do you feel about that?
So I agree with the idea that the benchmark for success of a relationship should not be based off the duration. Our relationships are here to serve many different reasons, right? There's this old poem, a reason, a season, or a lifetime. And I believe that some relationships, they're character building. They help you understand, what do you not want? What do you do want? And they change you. And I think those are so necessary. And so to say those are failures, I think is incorrect. So I agree that, just because something doesn't end in happily forever after, I actually think happily forever after is an unrealistic expectation. And it's built on fantasy and fairy tales and love songs that can sell a very entertaining plot, but it doesn't set us up for success, because that's not reality based.
I think I agree with it. However, I've noticed personally for myself, I've been married for 15 years now, and there is a point in the relationship where you kind of realize that the dynamic won't be what it's like on the honeymoon. In the sense that you fall into this sort of routine of domestic complacency. And I think that's the trade-off. I think you trade that roller coaster ride for the ride on the little thing that just kind of goes round and round and round. And sometimes we all kind of want to go back to the roller coaster, but then you're sort of happy when you get off and go back to the little thing that goes round and round and round. And I think the older I get, the more I appreciate the stability. I think when I was younger, I was looking more for entertainment. And now I'm looking more for comfort and security, knowing that my partner is there and that we're together and everything is cool. And
yeah, I mean, you explain what the stage you're in is companion love.
Yeah.
And, there's different stages of love, and there's that romance and honeymoon phase. And to understand just like the science of it, when you are first dating someone, you're flooded with different chemicals, namely dopamine. Dopamine is the molecule of more. It is what compels you to, eat more chocolate and, obsess over your beloved. And it feels amazing when your affections are returned, and it feels horrible when it's not. Now, Mother Nature kind of gives you this chemical cocktail to create that momentum for you to pair bond. And then eventually there's different chemicals at play. And then when it moves into a more comforting, calm dynamic, that it's less dopamine and more oxytocin and vasopressin. These are bonding hormones. And so this kind of takes you into that next phase of companionship. Now, that chemical cocktail lasts in general between 8 months to 2 years. It's actually not physically possible for you to be in that state of excitement and high arousal and intensity. It's completely unhealthy. And so people who don't understand that this is a phase and it moves into another phase, they might then doubt their relationship. And that's why you see breakups and divorces happen in the one year to 2 year mark. And I don't think it's a coincidence that that's when the dopamine tends to wear off.
Well, that's a good point, and I think you're absolutely spot on with that. The one that always perplexes me are the ones that have been married for 20 years and then get divorced. But then somebody explained to me that was because of the kids. Like they stayed together until the kids were grown up and out of the house, and then they got divorced. Does that make sense? Mm-hmm. Because I couldn't see getting divorced with somebody that I've been with for that long. I just would say, well, why not? Unless they got married really young. I mean, that's the only other.
Yeah, I've seen many different reasons. I've seen, people after 15, 20, 30 years end it because one person decided to stray and wanted to chase that butterfly dopamine. I've also seen two people who had a beautiful relationship and raised incredible children, and after 20 years realized that they had changed into different people. They've grown apart and decided to separate amicably. And that relationship was not a failure. They had an incredible time together, and now they're ready to explore another phase of life. I think it's extremely personal, and there isn't one size fits all. I think it also depends on your values and did you have a more traditional upbringing? I know for my parents, they stayed together for over 40 years and they've had chaos in their relationship the entire time, but they don't believe in divorce. So I'm not here to say what's right or what's wrong. I think it's a very deeply personal decision, and there's so many different factors at play. And yes, children, family, cultural background, all of those are different factors.
Well, we do have to kind of wind this down. Do you want to give us a summation of your service? This is a service as well as a book, right?
Yeah, so people can come to Breakup Boot Camp. They can buy the book. The book, I really wrote it because I know there's a lot of people who can't actually make it to an actual retreat. And the book offers the tried and tested tools that have worked for hundreds of people. And so, I think for anyone listening who's going through a breakup or a separation, I would say, do not vilify your ex. I think people can sometimes get so caught up in blaming the ex, psychoanalyzing the ex, or hoping for their ex to change. And this keeps them locked in a relationship with them, just regardless of how long the divorce papers were signed or when the breakup happened. And sometimes we hold on to the pain because that's the last part of the relationship that we've got left. So I really caution people on that and the narratives that they're telling themselves over and over again.
Do you have a website that you want to give out?
Yeah. People can find me on renewbreakupbootcamp.com and on social media at Miss Amy Chan.
Okay, great. And how long has the book been out?
It just launched December, so it's been 1 month.
How's it doing?
Doing pretty good, yeah.
Well, Amy, thanks so much for coming on the show. This was nice talking to you. Nice meeting you. And best of luck. And hopefully we'll get rid of this COVID thing once and for all and we can get back to our lives,
Yeah, I hear you. Well, thanks so much for having me.
You're listening to Mr. Smooth and Savvy right here on the Douglas Coleman Show. We'll be right back after these commercial messages.
DJC Music and DJC Productions are pleased to announce a brand new website. We have started a listing website for radio show hosts as well as potential show guests. This is a meeting site where hosts and guests can come together. Show hosts can list their show and types of guests they're interested in booking. Potential guests can list their talents, bio, accomplishments, or anything they feel makes them an interesting radio show guest. There are no recurrent payments, only a one-time $5 listing fee. Your listing will stay up until you decide to cancel. Previous guests of The Douglas Coleman Show are welcome to submit their guest listing free of charge. Go to radiohostsandguests.com. That's radiohostsandguests.com.
Love coffee, huh? But wait a minute. It seems like every time you finish a cup of coffee, you get all of these side effects along with it. Heartburn, indigestion, upset stomach, acid reflux. As the world's first and only organic acid-free coffee, Tyler's Coffee is able to provide a healthier option in the solution for more than 100 million individuals who have sensitive stomachs or suffer from acid-related modalities. This is Tyler's acid-free coffee. Coffee without the consequences.
Hi, this is John Morgan, Production Supervisor for DJC Productions. You're listening to The Douglas Coleman Show.
Okay, please welcome to the Douglas Coleman Show, Nicole Haldoupis. Hi, Nicole. How are you?
Hi, I'm good. How are you?
Oh, doing fine. Thank you very much. Let's see. It says on your bio, it says you are a queer writer, editor, and designer from Toronto. How come queer is being used in sort of an acceptable manner these days? Because when I was growing up, that was not a nice word to say to somebody.
Yeah, that's a really good question. I think it's I guess it's sort of being used now like as an umbrella term, to define a lot of different things. And I don't know why it's being more widely accepted now. Maybe it's sort of like a reclaiming the word type thing.
Yeah, okay. I mean, I just don't know, because all I know is that was not considered a nice thing to call somebody who either was gay or not gay. It just was a derogatory word to use, period. And, now all of a sudden it's part of the letter acronym LGBTQ, right? And I don't know. I just found it interesting. Okay. Well, anyways, can you just tell us a little bit about your background? And then you've got a book I know you're promoting called Tiny Ruins, right? Is that your book?
Yeah, it's my first book.
Your first book, okay.
So I guess, I grew up in Toronto, and I lived there until about 2014, I think, when I was 23. And then I moved to Saskatchewan, Saskatoon specifically, where I did an MFA in writing program. And that's where I started working on Tiny Ruins. Actually, I think some of the pieces I started before, but in Toronto, I went to York University and I did the writing program there. And I think some of the stories started in that program. But anyway, I started, Tiny Ruins was my thesis project at the University of Saskatchewan. And I focused on writing flash fiction and prose poetry and Vignette, which Tiny Ruins is made up of, mostly flash fiction.
Well, you mentioned a couple of words there that I don't really know what it is. You said flash fiction, F-L-A-S-H? Mm-hmm. What is that?
So flash fiction is basically like a very short story. So, there's different and maybe some conflicting definitions still. So I think usually people define it as like a story that is less than, say 1,000 words or maybe 750 words. But it does sort of have to be like a complete story. So, have a beginning, middle, and end, and have a plot and that sort of thing. Okay.
So it's basically the length of the story. So instead of it being a short story, it's like a short story. And they call it flash fiction.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah.
And the other one you used, which I've heard, but I'm still not quite sure what it is Vignette. Mm-hmm. What is that?
That's, similar. I guess this is a lot of what I did. My thesis project was sort of like defining these different things that are very similar, and they have a lot of crossover. So a vignette, it's basically also a very short story, but it doesn't have to be a full story. It can just be like a little flash of like an image or a scene, and it doesn't necessarily have to have. It's a little bit of prose, basically. It doesn't have to have like a beginning and middle and end. Okay. Yeah.
Tell me a little bit about Saskatoon, because I think you're the first person I've had on this show from Saskatoon. What is it like? It's
a really lovely place. I've since moved I live in St. John's, Newfoundland now, but but
okay.
Saskatoon is really quite lovely. It's got a big river in the middle, which is nice, and like the downtown is sort of, along the river. Yeah, it's very flat, so if you like biking, it's really a nice place to bike around.
So it's similar to the American Midwest, yeah?
I guess so.
It's really cold in the winter?
Oh, yeah. Very cold.
Very cold. Okay. All right. Well, why don't you tell us about your book, Tiny Ruins?
Sure. So I guess the publisher, Radiant Press, they're in Regina, Saskatchewan, and they described it as a funny and touching coming-of-age and coming-out story that follows Alana as she grows up and navigates perplexing and sometimes hostile world. So it follows two sisters, but it focuses on one of them, her name is Alana. And it goes from when they're very young to sort of, through high school and into university age. And I guess somewhere along the line, Alana realizes that she likes boys and girls, and she tries to tell her sister, and it doesn't go so well, and she sort of, experiences that like internalized kind of homophobia type thing from the people around her and who she's close with, sort of follows her on that journey.
Okay. What made you decide to write this book? What inspired this?
That's a good question. I guess the form, I had really liked writing in very short forms. I think always, I kind of, like, full short stories kind of scare me. But there was a book in particular that I read near the beginning of my MFA. It's called Safekeeping by Abigail Thomas. And that's sort of, it's nonfiction. It's like a memoir, but it's written in very short vignette type things. And I really liked sort of the effect of that way of storytelling. Just like getting little flashes of information, and that sort of leads you through the character's life. And then, I don't know, I guess a lot of the themes in the book too are things that are close to my own life. Sort of not knowing what to do with the thing that you realize about yourself. So I wanted to explore that from using the flash fiction form.
Okay, so this was based on your own personal experience about coming out and dealing with sexuality?
A little bit, yeah.
Did you have a difficult time with that, with yourself or with other people? Or?
Yeah, I didn't really come out until very recently. I think I realized in high school that I had a crush on a girl for the first time, and I didn't really tell anyone and didn't really know what to do with it, so I kind of just ignored it for like 10 years or so.
Well, society is better about it now than they were. I think, I think it's better for kids these days and young people who are struggling with their sexuality to be in this climate than it was, 20, 30, 40 years ago.
Yeah, definitely.
All right. Anything else you want to talk about?
I'm not sure. Would you like me to read a small, tiny story from Tiny Ruins?
Yeah, okay. That sounds like a good idea.
This one is called Four Flutes, and it was originally published in an online magazine out of Montreal that's called Bad News. Brassy squawks erupted from inside the classroom. Janie told Alana she'd walked in behind Charlie, the freckly boy she couldn't stop staring at whenever she got the chance. She hoped no one was looking, but it was hard to tell sometimes. She wanted to play the saxophone because it was handsome and sounded different from all of the other instruments. She wasn't sure, though. Most of the other girls wanted to play the flute because it was small and pretty. She sat beside Charlie and looked at the freckle near his mouth that moved when he smiled. "What do you want to play?" he asked her. "I don't know. What do you want to play?" "I think I want to play the sax." "Me too." She was so excited about learning the saxophone, just her and Charlie, thought maybe they could meet up at each other's houses after school to practice. The teacher went around the room, writing down the students' choices. "Sax," yelled Charlie. "Me too," Janie said. "I'm afraid we only have one alto sax. One of you will need to pick something else." They looked at each other. Charlie's freckle returned to its original spot. "The clarinet is similar to learn," the teacher told them. They looked at each other again, knowing how much the other wanted to play the sax. "I'll play clarinet, I guess," offered Janie. The teacher scribbled on his clipboard and assigned her a clarinet number to retrieve from the pile. Charlie ran to the only saxophone case in the room. Janie walked over to the clarinet pile and then to the clarinet section, sat in her black folding chair next to the girls who wanted to play the flute. That's it.
Oh, that's very good. Do you have a website you want to give out so people can check out your book?
I do have a website, yeah. It's NicoleHaldoupis.ca. I also draw cats. So some of that's on there as well.
You also what? Draw cats?
I draw cats, yes.
Oh, okay. Well, that's good. Well, thank you for coming on the show, and thank you for sharing your book with us, and best of luck. Is the book out now?
It's out, yeah. It came out in October, so it's available, wherever you buy your books from, and also on Amazon.
Okay. How's it doing?
I think it's doing pretty good. It was on, it did get to Amazon's, it was on there under their bisexual fiction list. They got to number 1 on their hot new releases, and it was number 2 on their bestseller list.
Okay. Oh, great. Well, congratulations. Okay. Well, again, thank you for coming on the show, and best of luck.
Yeah, thank you so much for having me.